I want to welcome you to CalNonprofits Repayment Restart and Public Service Loan Forgiveness, What You Need to Know Now webinar. My name is Robert Gibbons, and I am the Education Director at the California Association of Nonprofits, also known as CalNonprofits. Before we get started, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So we do have both a chat and Q&A box. The Q&A box is going to be the place where you can ask questions. We do have a really full house today and a lot of material to cover, so we may not be able to specifically answer your question, but we're going to do our best to answer everyone's thoughts. So please feel free to pop those questions into the Q&A box, and we can use the chat box to really say hello and communicate amongst each other. Now, I do want to do a quick plug about CalNonprofits. We are a membership association of over 10,000 nonprofit organizations in California, and we have a myriad of resources for our members. Lynn, could you move us over to the membership slide? Great. So as you can see here, we have all sorts of resources and services available, but I think one of the most important offerings that we provide are webinars like this one, creating spaces for nonprofit community members to connect, to learn and discuss important issues that affect our community. Student debt being a primary concern and especially important right now. So as we get started, I want to do a quick framing of this issue. Student debt, as a borrower myself, student debt is painful, it's expensive, it's confusing. It's one of those things, that keeps us up at night. It's a conversation I find myself having around the dinner table with my friends. And the recent reform efforts, have largely been a result of nonprofit advocacy. And so I think it's important for us to highlight in this webinar the connection and intersection between education and policy and advocacy. So today, what we're going to be doing is educating you all on the changes on the repayment system, the changes to student debt, and also make the connection on what you can do as an individual and as an organization to advocate for reform. So let's start off with, why is this important? For those of us that are borrowers like myself, it's important because it's about our money. It affects our bottom line. But this is also a really important issue for those of us that don't hold student debt. Vehicles like the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program really allow and enable people to work for nonprofits. It is a tool that allows employees to work for organizations that serve our communities. So without programs like these, the services that your nonprofits offer its constituents might not be available. So it's really important for us to step up, have our voices heard, and advocate for changes that support our nonprofit community. So I think that leads us right into introductions. And today we have two really wonderful speakers that I'd like to bring on. First, I'd like to introduce Celina Damian, and she is the Student Loan Servicing Ombudsman for the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. Celina has done a ton of these webinars. She is an all-star in this space and is an authority on the student debt issue. So we're really happy to have her here today. In addition, we also have Natalia Abrams, who is the founder and president of the Student Debt Crisis Center. And as a borrower myself, I am really appreciative of all of Natalia's work through the pandemic and prior to that. They have tirelessly been communicating with borrowers to keep them informed and updated as to the changing regulations and also ways to get involved and make your voices heard. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Natalia for her to do a quick plug about her organization and describe to us ways that we can be advocates for change in student debt. Take it away, Natalia.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. As Robert said, I'm Natalia Abrams. I'm the president and founder here at Student Debt Crisis Center. We are a people-powered movement, a grassroots organization representing over 2 million supporters nationwide. Our theory of change is to center the needs and voices of student loan borrowers by partnering with allies like folks here on the call to impact public policy and end the student debt crisis once and for all. We had been, some of you may have known us as Student Debt Crisis. We were a C4. We are now a 501c3 nonprofit organization fighting hard on 2 fronts. Thank you, Jan. That's very sweet. Working directly with borrowers to help them navigate the frustrating student loan process and repayment system, and then also advocating to cancel student debt, as part of our theory of change in the student debt crisis. And we know that's a 2-pronged fight of both fighting for the high cost of college and then ending the student debt that borrowers are, bogged down by. And, I got involved personally after the Great Recession when there was out of control tuition hikes. Those of you may have remembered in 2010 in the UC system, they rose tuition 31%, I believe, from one semester to the next. I had colleagues that had to drop out of their senior year because they couldn't afford to complete school, which those of us that work in education know completion is really rare. You're better off paying that debt than if you don't complete. But we definitely work with all borrowers, all shapes and sizes, and just very dedicated to ending this crisis. And I'd love to share with you some of the things we're working on and how, at Student Debt Crisis, we really try to blend advocacy and education and policy together. And there's a new campaign that we're working on right now called the Save on Student Debt campaign. This is in relationship with Civic Nation and the Department of Education. In addition, additional founding partners to Student Debt Crisis Center is NAACP, UNIDOS, National Urban League, Young Invincibles, and I always feel like I'm leaving someone out. And then we are inviting you to sign up. You can go to saveonstudentdebt.org to join us for monthly meetings and taking part in weeks of action to get the word out about the SAVE program, which Robert's going to talk to you all about today. And then also the other repayment programs like and public service loan forgiveness. We always say that you can't teach one of these programs in a vacuum. You have to cover all of them together. And I already have reviewed your deck and you're in good hands for today. So we really urge you to join these monthly meetings that we're launching with a week of action next week. And if we can go to the next slide. At Student Debt Crisis Center, we will doing our ambassador meeting. So we have launched an ambassador program. This is something we started last year for student debt cancellation, but are moving it to teach people about the SAVE program. And this is to educate borrowers, their friends, loved ones with a peer-to-peer network. You don't have to be a student loan borrower to be an ambassador, but we will have monthly meetings. This is separate from the Civic Nation meetings to help folks learn how to share resources, toolkits, and invite their friends, family, and loved ones to our existing workshops. We also have at Student Debt Crisis Center another workshop. We know a lot of you have to go to more than one. This is wonky, complicated information. I know I've had to go to more than one workshop. So we have a workshop September 13th. I believe that's at 3 p.m. Pacific. And then we will be launching in late September our workshop series. We're going back to basics with entering repayment and trying to figure out a way to segment our workshops and take it slowly for folks. Some folks don't even know what type of loan they have. So we want to make sure to get all of that information out to student loan borrowers and their loved ones. And then here in California with Celina, who's on this call with the DFPI, Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, and the Campaign for California Borrowers' Rights are hosting workshops with California lawmakers. Our next one is September 19th with Assembly Member Ward. So we just, we feel, and I feel personally at Student Debt Crisis Center, it's really important to meet borrowers where they're at. That's helping them with repayment. Often when we have found when borrowers can block out that financial noise and aren't worried about that monthly payment because you did your job and got them on a $0 payment through SAVE, they're more likely to take part in advocacy, to then sign petitions and share their stories. And so that's always been kind of our extra theory of change here at Student Debt Crisis Centers, to both help borrowers and then encourage that help and relief into acts of advocacy and acts of change. So I really appreciate being here with you all. CalNonprofits is a great place. We're a member as well, and a proud member. So thank you, Robert, for inviting me on.
Thanks so much, Natalia. We really appreciate you joining us. And just to remind everyone, again, SDCC is a wonderful resource that provides up-to-the-minute workshops and information, a really great resource to take advantage of. Sign up for their newsletter and stay in touch with Natalia. She'll be sure to keep you updated. Next, I would like to bring on Celina.
Am I on? Yeah. Hi, Robert. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here. Once again, my name is Celina Damian. I am the Student Loan Servicing Ombudsperson. It's a long title, but basically I'm a student loan advocate in the state of California. I am with the DFPI. Next slide, please. And just some things briefly, the agenda, some things we're going to go over, who we are, and the Student Borrower Bill of Rights for California borrowers. I will be talking about return to repayment, which includes talking about the SAVE program or the SAVE repayment plan, which Natalia mentioned. The on-ramp program, I will get into PSLF. I know many of you have PSLF questions already. I will be talking about the one-time adjustment, fresh start, scams, and how to protect yourself, and then additional resources. So we are covering a lot of information. Hopefully I can answer a lot of your questions, but enter them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. Next, please. So who is DFPI? We are California's Consumer Protection Agency. So for those that haven't heard of DFPI before, it's probably because we used to be Department of Business Oversight. So in 2020, we had a name change, and we also received additional enforcement authority to regulate additional companies of financial products. One of those companies, or one of those types of financial providers, included student loan servicers. At the DFPI, we investigate and then we accept and review consumer complaints. We take legal action when these companies are not in compliance, and we protect consumers from fraud and abuse through education and outreach such as this one. The education and outreach in my program, or the student loan program, includes education on student loans, student loan literacy, credit building, and then how to protect yourself from scams and frauds. Next, please. All right, in California, we have about 4 million borrowers that owe approximately $141 billion of student loan debt. Most of that debt is federal student loans. California has the highest number of enrolled college students at 2.58 million, or almost 3 million borrowers. And in 2019, 2020, prior to the pandemic or the payment pause, 46% of California college graduates had student loan debt, and the average debt load of a California borrower is at approximately $37,000. In the United States, borrowers owe approximately, I believe it's more at $1.8 trillion of student loan debt, and that number is right behind mortgages. So we're second in consumer debt category. Next, please. And then one thing that is very significant about student loan debt is the disproportionate impact on students of color. So basically what's happening is more students of color are going to school, they're accessing higher education, but the costs of education are higher, and they are entering higher education or schools with less resources. So therefore they have to take out more debt. In California, over half, 56% of the students who attend public 2- and 4-year institutions come from families that earn under $40,000 annually. 90% of Black and 72% of Latinx students take out college loans in comparison to 66% of white borrowers, and Black women have the largest student debt burdens of all. A borrower in a 75% minority neighborhood is 5 times more likely to fall behind on their student loan payments. And the default rates are higher for Black borrowers, followed by Latinx borrowers and first-generation students. So it's very important that we understand this impact, and I'm glad everyone is here to learn about how to help with student loan debt. Next, please. So one thing a step that California took in 2020 was passing the California Student Borrower Bill of Rights. So this is an additional protection in addition to the rights that are provided by the federal government through the Higher Education Act. The Borrower Bill of Rights applies to students with both federal and private loans, and it applies to student loan servicers doing business in California, including state licensed servicers. We license those servicers, as well as banks doing servicing. And what it does, it prohibits servicers from engaging in abusive, unfair, or deceptive practices, and they require that they work in the best financial interest of borrowers, which is something that they were not doing for many years. Servicers must provide borrowers with information and applications for income-driven repayment plans and other forms for federal benefits and protection. And right now, it is very important that borrowers are receiving this information and the appropriate applications for all these programs. It establishes special protections for military borrowers, borrowers working in public service, older borrowers, and those with disabilities. So servicers have to train their staff appropriately to work and help these borrowers when they contact the servicers for information. And then it protects borrowers from any negative consequences stemming from a sale, assignment, transfer, system conversion, or payment made. So the reason why I like to include this, especially right now, is that if a borrower incurs a negative consequence due to a transfer, which there were millions of transfers during the COVID pause, I'll talk about it in a few slides, a borrower should not be affected negatively. So they should have a servicer should have all the information, should have accurate payment history to help the borrower get back into repayment. A borrower can file a complaint with us through our complaint portal, or you can contact me if you're not sure whether or not you should file a complaint. But right now, I'm working with servicers, with borrowers on a daily basis. And if you're calling to get information on your account history, if you're calling and not getting an answer from a servicer, which is happening a lot, if you're calling about your PSLF count, I am encouraging everyone to file a complaint, because we need these complaints on file. We need to, in order for us to hold these servicers accountable and to be able to enforce this law, which is brand new, we need borrowers to let us know what is going on. And the only way we're going to know is through these complaints. California is only one of 13 states that has established this advanced legislation to strengthen oversight of student loan servicers and protect borrowers. And then another thing that it did is it added my position as well to work with borrowers. Next, please. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of all the updates and the changes, I want to just go over some key terms when I'm talking about federal loans and private loans. So when I'm talking about federal loans, I'm talking about those that are made and funded directly by the U.S. Department of Education. Okay, these are through the William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program. These loans have interest rates that are fixed and set by Congress. No credit check is required, and you're going to have those subsidized or unsubsidized loans. And the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized is the way that the interest accrues. For subsidized loans, borrowers do not start accruing interest until they are done with school or start going less than half time. Unsubsidized, it's the interest starts accruing as soon as the loan is disbursed. However, they are still federal loans. And one of the best ways to know if you have a federal direct loan is if your payments were paused during the pandemic. If they weren't, then you most likely have a private loan, or you may have a FFEL loan, which I will be speaking about today. So FFEL loans are loans that are commercially held loans, but they're backed by Department of Education. So they're not fully Department of Education owned loans. So basically you have the private lender with the Department of Education. They're both involved in your loan. So in order to get the benefits of a lot of these programs that I'm talking about, borrowers with FFEL loans need to consolidate, and I'll talk about that later. Private loans are made by lenders such as banks, credit unions, state agencies, or a school. They do not offer the flexible repayment terms and the forgiveness options, and they often require an established credit record or a cosigner. One thing that's very important to note is that if you refinance your federal loan into a private loan, you cannot convert it back. So be very careful, read the terms, understand that you will be losing out on federal forgiveness programs or benefits. And then lender and servicer. Again, with federal loans, your lender is going to be Department of Education. With the private loans, your lender is going to be a bank. We're going to be talking about student loan servicers a lot. Servicer is the company that Department of Ed contracts with to help borrowers with their loans. So they're the ones that actually track the loans. They send the borrower their bills every month. They collect and they process loan payments. They process all the changes in repayment plans, forbearances, deferments, and they are going to be the borrower's main point of contact. So this is going to be your Mohila, your Nelnet, it's FedLoan, which is no longer in the business, but they're the ones that, and then throughout the life of the loan, you will be transferred. You may be transferred. You cannot request a transfer on your own to request servicer. These transfers are done automatically by Department of Education. So you may have more than one servicer throughout the life of the loan, but one thing I'm going to stress, very important, is know who your servicer is and where to get in touch with them and their portal. So next, please. All right, so return to repayment. So in March of 2020, all payments to federal student loans were paused and interest rates were set at 0. So during the entire time, no interest was accrued. This started March of 2020. In June, due to a debt ceiling agreement, no more extensions were granted, and student loan interest resumed on September 1st of 2023, so just last week, and payments will be due starting in October, so next week. As a result of the, many of you probably heard of the debt relief that was announced back in August. That debt relief was blocked by the Supreme Court, and so the Department of Education took steps in order to help borrowers with returning to repayment and to offer other benefits since the $10,000 to $20,000 debt relief was not passed. So what they did was they created this Saving on a Valuable Education SAVE plan. So the SAVE plan is a repayment plan. It is an income-driven repayment plan. And the SAVE plan right now, Natalia was talking about it, that they're doing the campaign. They're really encouraging borrowers to look at this plan. So repayment options can be really confusing. There are 4 different income-driven repayment plans, which are based on a borrower's income. So they'll look at your income, you certify every year, and based on that, they'll determine your payment. Then there's 3 traditional payment plans that are not based on income. Those are a set time frame, and those are based on the loan balance. So this new SAVE plan is replacing the Repay plan, which is one of the income-driven repayment plans. And one of the 3 critical benefits that have been implemented immediately is that it increases the income exemption from 150 to 225% of the poverty line. So what does that mean? Basically, they changed the way that they do calculations. So they use they're increasing the protected income of borrowers to help borrowers have an even lower payment under these income-driven repayment plans. So under this plan, a borrower that makes $32,800, I believe, a year, will have a $0 payment. Anytime we're on an income-driven repayment plan and your payment is at zero, even though you're not paying anything, you're still considered to be in repayment and in good standing. It's different than when you're on forbearance or in a deferment where you're not paying anything either. But this one, you're enrolled in the SAVE plan. They're changing the calculation. And one of the very important benefits about this is regarding the interest. So typically with student loans, and this is the reason why student loan balances grow drastically, is because of the way interest is accrued. So if, for example, if your monthly payment is $50 a month, you're on an income-driven repayment plan, but your interest a month on your total balance is $100. If that $50 payment that you're making does not cover the interest, they're adding an additional $50 to your balance. So that's called capitalization, and that happens all the time to all borrowers. And so under this plan, the department will stop charging that interest, which will not allow the borrower's balance to grow. So this is going to be extremely helpful. Also, married borrowers who file their taxes separately will no longer be required to include their spouse's income. And then there will be benefits that will be implemented next July. So July of 2024, you're going to have additional benefits where payments on undergrad loans will be cut in half from 10% to 5%. And this is in addition to the 25% of the poverty line. Borrowers with original principal balance of $12,000 or less will receive forgiveness after 10 years of making payments. Again, this does not go into effect until next summer. Borrowers who consolidate will receive credit for a weighted average. And then borrowers will be able to make additional catch-up payments, and borrowers who are 75 days late will be automatically enrolled in an IDR plan if they are have agreed to allow IRS information to be transferred automatically. We'll be doing a lot more webinars, information on this when the time comes, but right now it's just, we're really encouraging borrowers to check out this plan, especially if they're going to have trouble transitioning back into repayment. This is a link where borrowers can apply. There's also an on-ramp program that was announced. So from October 1st to 2023, to September of next year, missed, partial, or late payments will not lead to negative credit reporting, default, or loans being sent to collection agencies. This is something that I would encourage borrowers to check out the SAVE plan. If that plan is not, that payment is not something they can afford, if they miss a few payments to get going, then there will be no negative consequences. The only thing is the balances will still increase, and these missed payments will not count towards PSLF and then the IDR adjustment that I'll be talking about. So really look at your other options, and then and then if that doesn't work, then there's on-ramp available for those borrowers. Next, please. So some takeaway for getting started and preparing for repayment. Lots of changes have taken place since March of last year, including millions of service transfers. So during the pandemic, three of the major servicers no longer renewed their contract with Department of Education, and millions of loans were transferred to different servicers. So starting back up, a lot of borrowers that had a different servicer, now they're going back to those portals, or they're calling. Those servicers are no longer there. They've been transferred. So what a borrower needs to do is they need to find out who their servicer is. Plus, if there was changes in addresses, family sizes, 3 years, a lot could have taken place. It is very important. I cannot stress this enough. I get emails back to back to back. Know your loan information, know your loan type, know your balance, and your loan servicer. There could have been errors during the bank, during the transfers, during these 3 years. You may look at your balance and say, hey, this is not what I remember I owed. You need to make sure that interest wasn't accruing. You need to make sure all the loans were transferred properly. Update your contact information with your loan servicer and studentaid.gov. So if you have a federal loan, you're going to have two portals. You're going to have your studentaid.gov, which is going to be your main portal. Then you're going to have to create one, or an account with the servicer. That's where you're going to be making payments. That's where you're going to be checking your account history as well. You can get it at studentaid.gov, but your loan servicer is the one that will be giving you the latest up-to-date information. So you will have two accounts. Again, if you don't know who your servicer is, you're going to need to go to studentaid.gov and create that account there. And you'll see your servicer as well as the link there. You'll see all your loans, everything there as well. Read all communications that you receive, emails, look at the portals. I know that just yesterday someone emailed me and they went into their Mojila account and they had a zero balance. They went into studentaid.gov and they had a zero balance. And I said, did you apply for PSLF? Yeah, I did, but I haven't read anything. Well, there was an email in March from Mojila. They had received PSLF. So read all the communications directly from the portals. Bills will be mailed out with your payment amount and due date at least 21 days before your due date. Enroll or re-enroll in auto-pay. So if you were enrolled in auto-pay prior to the pandemic, to the start of the pause, you were re-enrolled and you need to go ahead and do that on the servicer portal. You will save 0.25% on your interest rate. Explore your repayment options. In addition to the SAVE plan, there's, like I said, 3 other income-driven repayment plans. The SAVE plan may not be the lowest, just depending on income. So really look at your options. Department of Ed has a great loan simulator tool where you can enter your information and it will give you your estimated payment amount with your payoff amount and forgiveness date if it applies. And then again, this is another link from studentaid.gov that gives great information. It stresses basically all the tips that I've talked about today. Next, please. Now we're going to talk about PSLF. So PSLF was created in 2007 to encourage individuals to enter and remain in public service. And under this program, federal student loans are forgiven after 10 years or the balance after satisfying certain criteria. There was a waiver that was created in 2021 because when the first cohort of borrowers applied after 10 years, there was 97-98% denial rate. So Department of Ed, in order to reform the program, help borrowers, they understood that there were issues where servicers were not providing the correct information. They were not getting borrowers on the correct repayment plan. They were not tracking correctly. Instead, what they were doing was they were placing borrowers on forbearance or deferments, which was increasing the borrower's balance and not giving them credit. They were just misinforming, and then no one was managing those servicers appropriately. So they created this waiver, which ended last year. As of March of 2023, almost 42,000 Californians have received nearly $3 billion in PSLF. Through my department, we have already seen over $1 million in PSLF forgiveness come through. So this program does work. It is a little bit complicated, but it's working. And this is a program that is not, there's no threat to this program. This is completely different than the debt relief program that was blocked in the Supreme Court. This one is written in the law. We don't expect any changes but positive ones to this program. So this program we can go forth with. Next, please. So what are the requirements? You have to have a federal loan, a direct loan. It can be subsidized or unsubsidized. Direct plus loans to graduate students to apply. Parent plus loans, direct parent plus loans do qualify, but they need to consolidate. So the only thing with parent plus loans, unfortunately, parent plus loan borrowers don't get a lot of the same benefits that other borrowers get. Don't know why. It's just, something that SDCC, Natalia, and all the advocates are really fighting for, to get parent plus loans included. They weren't included in the SAVE program either. So I do get a lot of questions about parent plus loans. So parent plus loans do need to consolidate into a direct loan. So the only thing is, when you do consolidate into a direct loan, you will only get access to one of the income-driven repayment plans, which is one of the ones that can be cost a little bit more. So really, when you're consolidating, make sure that you use the simulator to see what your payment would be under their ICR plan, or that income-driven repayment plan. But you have to have direct loans. FEL loans also need to consolidate over to a direct loan. Your employment, it can be a government organization at any level, state, municipal, tribal, military, or a 501c3 organization. So you have to be a paid employee very important. You can be in any position. You can be in legal and research and maintenance and any position, as long as your W-2 form says that that's the employer, then you're good to go with that requirement. So you have to have work at least 30 hours per week. So ignore this employer's definition of full-time. They just changed the regulations to just make them more streamlined, more clear. You have to work at least 30 hours per week to meet the requirement. And then the repayment plan, any of the income-driven repayment plans, the SAVE, the ICR, IDR, IBR. And then qualifying payments. You have to have 120 payments. They do not have to be consecutive. So if you took some time off, if you had went into private service and then came back, they do not have to be consecutive months. You may prepay or make a lump sum for up to 12 months or when your next IDR is due. Next, please. So how do you get started? You can, first of all, check your employer. So here's a screenshot of the employer search tool that studentaid.gov has. You will need your employer's federal employee ID number, FEIN. It's the one on your W-2, and it's different than the state employee number. So you can enter the FEIN there, and you can see that if the employer is eligible. So just because it says, you may go on there and it may say undetermined, you may not find your employer on there. That does not mean it's ineligible. All it means is that no one from your agency has applied yet. So as long as you submit your application, if you're working for a 501c3, then you can go ahead and apply, or any of these companies. So basically, state of California, we all have one number. So as you can see, we're eligible. We have many borrowers who have already applied, but if it's a smaller organization, if you don't see it on there, don't get startled and think, oh, I don't qualify. If you meet those, you know that they're 501c3, go ahead and apply. Like I said, you're going to need the FEIN, not only for the search tool, but to do the actual application. Find out what type of loans you have. As I said, if you have a Parent Plus loan, if you have the FEL loans, those older loans, you're going to need to consolidate them in order to get to be able to apply. Right now, if a borrower with a FEL loan, that's those older commercially held loans, if you consolidate before the end of the year, so this is sort of an extension of the PSLF waiver benefit. If you consolidate before the end of 2023, they will go ahead and give you credit back to the oldest date, the date of the oldest loan. So you're still going to get credit. It's not going to reset your account as it typically does. So this is where these are borrowers that have had these loans for 15, 20, 25 years. After 2010, they no longer provide, or they no longer offer FEL loans. They're all direct federal loans. So those borrowers consolidate the loans. Parent Plus borrowers, if you've already had your 10, 15 years in public service and you have a Parent Plus loan, you can consolidate over to get the benefit of PSLF, and you'll be able to go back and certify if you've never applied before. You submit the employer certification form. So the ECR and the initial PSLF application is the same one. You can do the application through the PSLF help tool. There's a link at the end of this PowerPoint, but now you can submit your certifications electronically through DocuSign. So it's making the process a lot easier. You can now, when you get in there, once you get started, like I said, you'll need the FEIN and you will need the correct email address for an authorizing official. So if any of you have certified before, you had to send it, get the PDF signature, return it. Now you can enter the email and they will receive an email directly from studentaid.gov requesting the signature, and then you will get notification of whether they signed it, it was rejected, or whatever. If they dismissed it, you will get a notification, but it's making the process a lot easier. FSA has a great PSLF help tool guide that has all this information. And then I believe we're providing this PowerPoint at the end. So I see a lot of questions, but next, please. Let's see. believe these are the key takeaways. Okay, so some key takeaways. If you missed the PSLF waiver and you're still employed with a qualifying employer, you can consolidate without resetting your account. So again, super important for those Parent Plus holders that have been working and can certify 10 over the 10 years. They won't miss out, their account won't be reset. And then for the FEL borrowers, if you are new to public service, you can apply now to start tracking your process. Or the progress. You don't want to wait until you're 7-8 years in to find out that the employer is no longer in business, that they've moved, that they've, whatever it is, you can start tracking early on. One thing that is super important, the CARES Act Forbearance Month count towards PSLF. So from March 2020 until now, if you were working for a qualifying employer and you can certify, you can receive credit for those months, even though you did not make a payment. So that's over 36 months, almost 40 months, I believe, of payments. So technically, you would only have to make payments for about 6.5 years. So this is really important. PSLF is non-taxable under federal and state law through 2025. And then they're adopting new guidelines regarding the hours per week and then deferment or forbearance. And they're formalizing the appeal process. Once all this goes through PSLF and the IDR adjustment, they will be creating basically a process where borrowers can appeal. And then the one-time income-driven repayment adjustment may increase your PSLF count. So I see a bunch of questions coming in. I'm not going to get to all of them, but if you applied for PSLF and you have not heard anything in 6 months, what I would advise you to do, if you go on the studentaid.gov website and Mohila website and you do not see anything that's been received or your account has been updated, go ahead and file a complaint with us and request that they provide you a status update on your PSLF count. Okay, if you received a count and it doesn't seem right to you, it's lower than it should, take into consideration periods of forbearance and deferment where you didn't make payments. Those months are not going to count, but you may receive credit down the line through the IDR adjustment. So I know it is a frustrating process. Mohila is your public service loan forgiveness servicer. So when you apply for public service loan forgiveness, your account automatically gets transferred to Mohila. So they are handling all the PSLF applications as well as other applications. But if you're not with Mohila and you applied a year ago, then something's wrong, right? If you go onto the studentaid.gov and you see that you're still with your previous servicer, then that application didn't go through. I always just say, if when in doubt, just submit a new application again, get it recertified. It doesn't hurt, even if they have it already or it's in line. They shouldn't be waiting at this point for more than 6 months. And we want to do that as soon as possible, because once repayment starts, now they're not only working with PSLF applications, but repayments and payments and everything else that comes along with that. Next, please. All right, so IDR forgiveness. So in addition to PSLF forgiveness, there is a different forgiveness program through income-driven repayment, through the income-driven repayment plans. So all the IDR plans have a forgiveness component where after 20 or 25 years of making payments, a borrower has their balance forgiven. Just like with the PSLF waiver, where servicers were not informing borrowers correctly, they were not tracking borrowers' payments, they were placing them on forbearance. In order to remedy that and to help borrowers, the Department of Education created a one-time IDR adjustment. Next, please. What this adjustment does, it's giving borrowers credit for any months they were in repayment status. They're giving borrowers credit for months in forbearance, for months in deferment, and any time that borrowers spent in repayment on earlier loans before consolidation. So what they're doing is they're going back and they're basically filling in the gaps of all these. There are borrowers that have been for forbearance on years on advice of the servicers. So in order to remedy that, get them closer to the 20-25 year mark, they're going in and basically filling in those gaps with months of credit. Now, you may have heard on the news recently about a month ago where there was a borrowers, 800,000 borrowers received forgiveness. It was IDR forgiveness. It was based on their income-driven repayment. So these are borrowers that have been paying for 20 to 25 years. They were on many different plans. They had forbearance periods. So they went in and they basically are giving them credit. So this is how they're giving them credit. Next slide, please. And then they're giving credit to borrowers who have a direct loan. And then the same thing with the FFEL loans. If borrowers have FFEL loans, they need to consolidate in order to be able to have their account reviewed. So they need to consolidate by the end of 2023 in order to not lose credit. And I think right now for me, when I talk to a borrower, if they have a FFEL loan, these are going to be these are the borrowers that that I don't want to say take priority, but really need to take action before the end of the year so they will not lose credit. So if you're a borrower that has a FFEL loan, so you'll see your loan on studentaid.gov. You were not part of you still had to pay through the pandemic pause, then you have a FFEL loan. And if you have been paying for a long period of time, and you can benefit from this, and you need to consolidate by the end of the year. So borrowers with loans in default can get out of default through the Fresh Start Initiative. And then they will make the adjustment and their credit certain payments. As I said, they're basically going in and crediting as much people, as many borrowers as they can. So if you're on an IDR plan or were in the past, if you're in public service loan forgiveness. So the way it's going to affect PSLF is that, again, it's going to fill in those gaps of forbearance and deferment. And I've already seen it where borrowers were at 110 payments, 100 payments, and then they just out of nowhere were granted forgiveness. That's because Department of Education went in and just gave them credit for those months. The thing about this program is that there is no tracker. You don't know whether or not you're eligible. You do not apply. This is something that's going to be done automatic. So the only thing I can suggest is that make sure you have the correct loan and make sure that you're on an income-driven repayment plan now. So just know when your loan was dispersed, how long you've had this loan, again, your loan basics. Next, please. So they will go back and they're going to they're going back to July 1st of 1994, which is the start of the IDR program. The first group of eligible borrowers were informed July 14th. That's those 800,000 borrowers. Ed will continue to identify and notify borrowers who reach the necessary forgiveness threshold of 240 or 300 months worth of qualifying payments, and a borrower will be able to opt out. Okay. Borrowers who are not eligible for forgiveness yet, who do not meet the 240 or 300 months, they will have their payment counts updated. If the review results in being eligible, then as I said, you'll be able to opt out. If borrowers made qualifying payments that exceed the forgiveness period, they will receive a refund for their overpayment if that payment was made on a direct loan. So if you consolidate your FFEL loan into a direct loan and then are granted forgiveness, you won't get a refund because those payments were made on those commercially held loans. And then FSA will introduce an IDR tracker similar to the PSLF tracker. As well. So then down the line, you'll be able to know exactly where you are if you don't receive forgiveness. So just a really important benefit. Again, this one does not have a qualifying employer, public employer requirement. It just requires that you're on income-driven repayment plan and that you're in repayment. So default won't count, and then forbearance and deferment moving forward will not count. Next, please. Fresh Start program is an initiative separate than IDR forgiveness, separate than PSLF. It is for borrowers that are in default. So any borrower that wants to take advantage of any of these programs, but they are in default, there's the Fresh Start program. So it's a one-time program that offers benefits, again, for borrowers with defaulted direct and FFEL loans, and then defaulted PERC and loans held by Ed. So if you want to get into repayment, now get into that SAVE plan to get onto PSLF, this would be the plan for you. Loans that are not eligible, as you can see there. The Fresh Start is available 1 year after the payment pause pause ends. So this program will run through September of 2024, will be available for borrowers. Next, please. The benefits will be that borrowers will regain access to Title IV federal student aid. They won't be subject to any collection efforts or collection fees. They've already stopped reporting default status in the CAVR system. And then they will, one of the things, so borrowers do have to opt in to Fresh Start. So they do need to contact Ed or their guarantee agency if they are in default in order to get into the program. It's a super simple 10-minute process. But again, if you want to get the benefits of PSLF and or the income driven repayment adjustment, you do need to look into this program. Next, please. So with everything that's going on, I understand it's really confusing and you may not know who to reach out to, who to call, who's legit, who's not. The scammers are aware of that. So they are reaching out to borrowers relentlessly by phone calls, by emails, mail, and they are offering services. They are offering to to consolidate your loans. They're offering forgiveness. They're offering to get you on a repayment plan. What we need everyone to understand is that there is nothing a company can do for you that you can't do on your own for free. You shouldn't have to pay. You don't pay for consolidation. You shouldn't have to pay for a repayment plan to switch to apply for any of the adjustment or PSLF. All these services are free. And one thing that I tell borrowers is that servicers and Department of Ed do not have time to call you 4 times a day, which is what they're doing. They're calling from different numbers. Sometimes they do have your loan information. So they'll say you have this much loan and we can help you. Make sure that you are dealing with someone that is legit, because what's going to happen is they could defraud you of money. They could get you signed up to a subscription service. And half the time they don't know what they're doing. It is a complicated process. Even letters that are being sent in the mail have a official looking logo. Read the fine print. You'll see the logo. The name of the company will sound like it's legit. Student Loan Assistance Program, student loan this, that. Read the fine print. It'll say on the bottom, this company is not affiliated with Department of Education. You do not want to get involved with them because they will all they're trying to do is steal your money and your identity. You can file a complaint with us or the FTC if you have been a victim of fraud. And you can also send me an email. I get them all the time. Is this you? Is this Department of Ed? Should I respond? You can Google anyone now, any company. If you see have the company name, Google them and you will find out whether or not they are legit or not. That's why it's super important to know now that you're getting started with repayments, studentaid.gov is going to be your main portal. And then your servicer is going to be your second portal. Any communication mail that they sent, it's going to be there in your message inbox. It's going to be, all the letters are going to be there. Like I told you, I had a borrower, she went in and had a letter from March that she hadn't even opened. So any communication, anytime they need to get a hold of you, you go ahead and go through the portal or go on their website. They have, even servicers have created a lot of information. They've created great sites. Many of them do send you back to studentaid.gov, but just make sure you're just dealing with both of them. And then of course, agencies like us, like Student Debt Crisis Center, we have a back on track page. Next page, I believe this is the one with the resources. While I'm talking, yeah, these are some of the important links. studentaid.gov about the SAVE plan, your main portal for logging in, PSLF, the IDR adjustment, and Fresh Start. So these are going to be your links. If you send me a message and you say, I want to know about PSLF, I'm going to send you this link. So when you email me, if you have more of a specific question and you're already in the process and want to have a more specific question, I'll respond. If it's a more general question, where do I find my account? How do I sign up for this? What is this? You're going to get these links just because of the volume of emails. Next, please. We have also created a back on track page. These are some of the links for our pages. I didn't include our back on track page, but we have a student loan page that we've created I'm on every page creating the content, and there's a list of resources. So there's a list of resources of legal aid foundations, of other organizations that work directly with borrowers in order to help them. So some of these situations are going to be a lot more complex if you have legal issues and things like that. So again, the Back on Track page is going to be the page all included in the chat. Okay, yeah, someone will include them in the chat, but I believe this is the last one, and I do see tons of questions, but Robert, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Celina. That was a ton of information. I really appreciate you wading through the treacherous waters of student loan repayment and our various options. We do have a lot of questions in the Q&A box. We've been able to answer about half of them, and we have a few minutes left. There is one question that I wanted to highlight and ask, and it comes from Jake, and it says, regarding interest capitalization on the SAVE plan, if my repayment doesn't cover the interest, they don't charge an additional amount. Does that mean my loan balance effectively stays the same since I didn't pay enough to affect the principal balance? This is a question that I have heard from friends and colleagues as well. So I wanted to ask this question to you.
Yeah, that's basically what it does. So your balance will remain the same, which is different than with other plans where even if you're making a payment, you'll see your balance slightly increase. So that is the benefit of the SAVE plan for those that don't want to see that loan increase, that balance increase.
That's great. Okay, one more question on the SAVE plan. Does the SAVE plan lower interest rates for consolidated federal loans? And even if we lower payments, the interest will accrue and you might end up still paying the same, but over a longer period of time.
Yeah, no, it doesn't change the interest rate. So the interest rate is set when a borrower takes out the loan at the start. That interest rate is set. And then when you consolidate, you actually get a weighted, so you may have a loan with different interest rates. So when you consolidate, you're going to get a weighted average of the interest rate. So that's really important to understand when you're consolidating. Look, that interest rate may increase or decrease on the loan depending, but the SAVE plan does not affect the set interest rate.
And this is just a final question that I think people have been thinking about because we've been on a hiatus. If I was not on an income-driven repayment plan for the last 2 years, do payments during that time count towards PSLF or no?
Yes, they're going to be counting, but you would need to switch over to an income-driven repayment plan now. Yeah, so if those would have been voluntary payments, I assume because if you had a federal direct loan, you would have been on the pause. So this borrower must have been making voluntary payments. So either way, they're going to get credit. So, right, because you're going to receive the credit during the pause. So if a borrower was making payments, it was either voluntary or because they had a FFEL loan or a private loan. So yeah, it gets tricky.
No, it gets tricky, and that's just the nature of the beast here, and that's why we're so thankful that you've joined us. There's been a lot of resources put forth today. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar in the coming days. Please feel free also to reach out to us at CalNonprofits, Celina, and Natalia Abrams for questions. We really want to do our best to provide answers for you all during this time of uncertainty, and work together as a group to advocate and continue to advocate for student debt reform. So I want to really thank Celina for spending so much time and patience with us today, as well as Natalia for her tireless work with SDCC. I also want to especially thank our off-camera CalNonprofits staff and our live captioner, Nicholas. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining. We really appreciate your time and attention, and have a wonderful afternoon.